The Roman Empire was in charge of politics and war in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East for almost 1,500 years. The so-called Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, may have ruled Rome for the last 1,000 years, but Rome may have been at its best in the first few hundred years of the first millennium after the Republic, but before it fell apart. People wore togas and fought in coliseums back then. Back then, there were slaves and masters, schools, science, art, and slaves. Britain was taken over, Vesuvius exploded, Nero's Rome burned, the good emperors were in charge, and the gods were happy. If you think of Rome, this time period comes to mind. Of course, an empire is what it is, and these times were also marked by violence, abuse, conquest, and death. It shouldn't come as a surprise that some very bad things happened when Rome was in charge, but it might surprise you how bad they were. Paving the way for 2,000 years of imperialism, one of the most stable and terrible facts of history is that no empire can live off of kindness. Basically, every single one of the greatest societies that ever spread across the earth, including the Romans, did so by taking over other people's land. The World Heritage Encyclopedia calls the way Rome took over other countries Raubwirtschaft. This type of colonialism, which is also called a plunder economy, aims to take over and use the resources of captured lands for the empire's own gain. You kill people, take over their land, and then steal anything that isn't nailed down. That's how your country makes money. This means that Rome's lands didn't get much help from the empire itself, and were almost always stolen from for the benefit of their leaders. And while Rome may not have been the first society to use this method, Africa did in the 1800s, it may have been one of the first or first. Perfecting the art of crucifixion. Crucifixion is now one of the most well-known ways to kill someone, all because of something called Christianity. One of the most brutal and shameful modes of death in the ancient world, according to the classicist Louise Cilliers, was being crucified. The Romans didn't really come up with the method, that credit goes to the Assyrians and Babylonians, but they spent 500 years making it better. People who lived in Rome were not punished, but slaves, Christians, and people from other countries could be nailed to a cross and left to die. In most cases, the person would die from a lack of oxygen in the blood loss, and slow asphyxiation. Roman guards couldn't leave the place where someone was being killed until they were dead, so they would often speed things up by stabbing, beating, or burning the person before the cross could do its job. Yes, it is perfected. Decimation, military history's cruelest punishment. The legions of Rome came up with decimation as a cruel and unusual way to punish groups that rebelled, ran away during battle, or didn't do their jobs well during wartime. The meaning of the word is removal of a tenth, which should help you figure out what happened. It would work like this: the troops who did wrong would be split into groups of 10. After that, there would be a lottery, and one of those guys would be picked at random. Then the other 9 would kill that man. It didn't matter what his rank was, how well known he was, or even what role he played in the first place. Then, the troops who weren't with the whole army would have to set up camp far away from them and eat nothing but raw barley for days. As a punishment, decimation wasn't used very often because it hurt confidence, but it did happen sometimes. The worst thing that happened was when Emperor Maximian ordered the death of a lot of Christians in the Theban Legion in the 3rd century because they wouldn't give up their faith. After they were killed, they refused to do what they were told again, and they were killed again. In the end, Maximian killed the whole army because they were protesting. The annihilation of an entire religion. At the time of the Roman Empire, religious persecution wasn't a new thing. Invaders had been trying to destroy faiths for thousands of years before the Romans, and they still are today. But it's very rare for a society to actually be able to get rid of a religion from their land. Come into the Roman Empire. Britain had been taken over by Rome in 57 AD, but the Roman forces were still having a hard time fighting back against a guerrilla campaign led by the Welsh tribes in the western parts of the country. Roman general Suetonius Paulinus took his troops from the city of Chester to the island of Mona, which is now called Anglesey. He did this because he was upset about his losses. Mona was both the spiritual and physical home of the leaders of the Britannic Druidic Church and the people who lived there. Author and radio host Phil Carradine says that many, if not most, of the Druids actually lived there and were certainly on the island when Suetonius attacked. Then there was a massacre. People of all ages were killed and their bodies were set on homemade pyres to burn. It was set on fire in the Druids' sacred groves, and their altars and churches were broken into. In one swift blow, Suetonius put an end to the Welsh opposition and took away the religious spirit of a whole culture. The few people who were still alive ran away to Ireland, and the Druidic faith was forced to hide. It has never come back. Relentless persecution of Christians. Some of you may not be surprised to learn that Rome tried to destroy Christianity, but it wasn't quite as successful as their attempts to kill Druidism. They did try, though. Many people thought Nero was the one who started persecuting Christians because he blamed them for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD to put an end to reports that he had started the fire himself. He was going to have Christians dress up in animal skins and have dogs tear them apart, Tacitus said. Rome made it so that Christians had to follow a "don't ask, don't tell" policy during the reign of Trajan in the 2nd century AD. That didn't stop other Romans from taking things into their own hands, though, and Christians were often hurt by angry crowds. Anyone who freely claimed to being a Christian and refused to turn away from their faith could be punished in many ways. Some were killed by being beheaded, while others were crucified, burned, or sent to be fed to the animals. This is where the common picture of Christians being fed to lions in the arena comes from. The madness of Rome's emperors. During the time of the Roman Empire, hundreds of rulers tried to take power. Many of them were real, but some weren't so much. Some were strong, and some were pretty harmless. Some were smart, fair, and good, or at least as good as a ruler can be. They avoided being mean, cruel, and crazy. It would be too long to name all of them. Caracalla is one of the most important. When he heard that the people of Alexandria were making fun of him, he rode to that city and started a party to bring people from the countryside. Then he called all the young men together in a nearby field and told them they would be part of his army as an honored phalanx. They were mostly killed by Caracalla's troops because they didn't have any weapons. The rest were buried alive. Of course, there was Commodus. He thought he was the real version of Hercules and often went into the arena to fight animals or other gladiators, usually ones who were hurt. He also liked killing lawmakers and wanted to change the name of Rome to his own name. Also, who could forget about Caligula? He had an affair with his own sister, enjoyed watching people get killed, and told his people that he was a live god and that a bridge should be built between the temple of Jupiter and his palace so he could visit his fellow god. Rome had some interesting people. Arenas bathed in blood and water. The arena is one of the most famous parts of Roman life, and for good reason. It was an important part of the empire's culture and a way for the rulers to keep the people happy. And not every event in the venue was violent, but a lot of them were. But the gladiator fights were the most important of these. As a warrior, you could be anyone. Most of them were slaves or prisoners of war, but sometimes free people volunteered to be gladiators so they could get the money that gladiators got when they took their oath. Some rulers, though, made Romans from the upper classes fight too. The games themselves could be as small as a fight between two gladiators, or as big as reenactments of whole wars that happened on land or sea and included thousands of people, chariots, horses, and ships at any given time. Besides all of this, arenas were also places where rare animals were killed, people died as martyrs, prisoners were put to death, and other horrible things happened. Normal stuff, right? Sexual depravities, misogyny, and rape culture. In many ways, the Roman view of sexuality was nothing less than horrifying. The idea of control was more important than orientation. He said that it was socially acceptable for a strong Roman male to have sexual relations with both men and women, as long as he was the aggressor. If the women they slept with were lower class, men were expected to rape them, visit whores, and sleep with slaves. The Romans also saw pedophilia as a normal way for men to control women, and they even saw ties between men and young boys as ideal. Ruger says that having a sexual relationship with another man, even if they were a child, represented a higher form of intellectual love and engagement. People thought that women were weak in both body and mind, always less capable than men, and only useful for serving. Women often got married young, were judged by their ability to have children, and could get harsh punishments for crimes like cheating. The machinations of the Praetorian Guard. When a dictatorship rules a country, power rarely changes hands from the ruler to the people. Quite often, power can be passed from one tyrant to another. In the last few years of Rome's life, however, the empire was actually run by the dictator's soldiers. In the time of the Roman Republic, the Praetorians were created as an escort service for important soldiers and leaders. Augustus, the first emperor, set up a newer, bigger unit called the Praetorian Guard. It was a constant bodyguard of 4,500 men whose only job was to keep the emperor and his family safe. In the later years of the empire, this unit had more than 10,000 men. People who were in the Praetorian Guard didn't have to pay taxes, got better gear, were paid more, and were often given gifts by the rulers they guarded. The Praetorians gained more and more political power as the throne's power decreased. To keep power, emperors had to give them gifts to make them happy. In 193 AD, they killed Pertinax because he didn't pay them enough, and then they let anyone who could pay take the throne. Emperor Caracalla was even killed by an officer in the Praetorian Guard called Macrinus, who was then made emperor himself. There were not many people in Rome with as much power as the Praetorian Guard. Because of them, the empire was run for long periods of time by a military government. A violent end. It was quick, violent, and terrible when Rome fell. The plunder economy couldn't last. When the empire stopped, conquests and attackers from other countries started taking over colonies, Rome's finances dropped, and the state went into a deep depression. At the same time, fighting within the empire between people who wanted to be ruler and different political figures started to break it apart. Lastly, aggressive immigration into Rome's lands, which the BBC says was carried forward at the point of the sword, destroyed the empire's tax base and led to the state's total failure. Many areas that were part of the empire broke up completely. The empire's fall was especially hard on Britain and northern Gaul, where the population dropped, especially among peasants. In Europe, the armed power changed hands and went to the wealthy landowners who could use the chaos to their advantage. The Pax Romana was now a faraway memory. As it had been before, war was how the rich got power. The warriors, aristocrats, and successor kings came from this burned and empty land. They were the new type of leaders who would rule Europe for another 1,000 years.